Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Namah Pranavarthaya Shuddha Jnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति शांति शांति. Good to see you back, Aradhana. How have you been? I can adjust your camera a little bit. I think it's too high. Yeah, better. We have finished the first two vallis of the Prathama Adhyaya, and we said we'll open for any question there may be. There are a few questions that have come. Yeah. What is the central theme of Kathopanishad? Dialogue between Nachiketa and Yama. Generally, Upanishads are dialogue between student and teacher. Usually starts with a question by the student and the answer by the teacher. And in all Upanishads, there is only one thing. The very name Upanishad, we've seen earlier, means that knowledge which tells you about what is closest to you and whose phala is the removal of the travails of samsara along with the root, Mulena Saha. And that is Atmajnanam. So in any Upanishad, there is only one central theme. What is the nature of I, the self? That Atmajnanam is the central theme. Because the central theme, this knowledge, is not so easy to grasp, given that our entire learning faculty is focused outwards. Outward meaning on objects, physical, non-physical, tangible, intangible, near, far, it doesn't matter. Object. That which can be objectified. So the self, in the initial case, the mistaken I, if you want that, is trying to understand everything in the Jagat. How did the Jagat come about? All our scientists have been working very hard to try and find that out. What was there before it started, which science is still struggling with, can't figure out. Can't figure out because it is a cycle. There is no beginning, there is no end. It just keeps going round and round. And in this, who created the Jagat? What is my role in this? And then this my role is something which we are struggling to figure out. As long as my concept of I remains within the Sharira, it is one perspective. But I can, through contemplative thinking, through logic, through analytical thinking, I can easily arrive at the fact that I and the Sharira have nothing to do with each other. But I still have to figure out what the I is. And that is the central theme of any Upanishad. Every Upanishad takes a different aspect, different perspective to arrive at the same knowledge of I. And you'll find in many of these Upanishads, there's a lot of talk about things which are worldly, laukika. And this worldly includes all the lokas. So it will talk about the relative happiness. It will talk about what happens after death of the body. It will also talk about the fact that you can use the same alambana to do both. To pray to Saguna Brahma Ishvara and also to reach out to Nirguna Brahma. Again, I'm using the word reach out to Nirguna Brahma. Hey, Nirguna Brahma is I. I can't be reaching out to I. But because of my inherent lack of understanding, entire humanity, I have to use words like reaching out to Nirguna Brahman, as if it is a third person somewhere. It is not. So here in Kathopanishad also, the approach taken, in fact, another question is probably relevant to this. What is the significance of the story of Nachiketa and his father? The first chapter, up to I think the first 9 or 10 verses, 9 verses, builds the story of Nachiketa, of the yajna that his father Vajashravas is doing, and more importantly, of the way Nachiketa thinks, really to exemplify how Nachiketa thinks and what kind of a Shishya he will eventually become. He's a child, but he knows his mind. So the first 9 verses or so brings about a description, an understanding of Nachiketa as a Shishya. He symbolically, his father says, I will send you to Mrityu, Lord Yama. And the story implies that he goes to Yamaloka to serve Lord Yama. as part of the dakshina of the yajna that his father was doing. Many things are brought out in this. That while the father said in a fit of anger that I give you to Lord Yama, but because the words have been pronounced, they have to be kept. Our culture is replete with these commitments made verbally. Modern world does not believe in verbal commitments. You know, there was a man called Goldwyn of Metro Goldwyn Mayer, the film company in Hollywood. He made a statement which has become part of English grammar called Goldwynism. He said, a verbal agreement is not worth the piece of paper it is written on. It's a paradoxical statement, but conveys what he is trying to say. That is the modern approach. A verbal agreement is not worth the piece of paper it is written on. Verbal agreement is not written on a piece of paper. How can I write a verbal agreement on a piece of paper? But that is not our culture. Culture is very much that once a commitment is made, entire Ramayana is based on that commitment. Dasharatha's commitment. It has to be kept, not only by him, by his children. That was the culture. So even though Father Shravas did not mean what he said, when he said, I give you to Lord Yama, that had to be maintained. In this portion, there's also a little bit of soliloquy. Nachiketa talking to himself, saying, I may not be the best in all circumstances, but I'm never the last, never the worst. He is already in the process of self-analysis. And then when he goes to your Lord Yama, again, the significant aspect of that is he goes to serve Lord Yama. And since Lord Yama was not there at that time, he just waited. 3 days he waited. He won't take food, he won't take water because he said, I can't do it without my master's instruction or permission. Again, shows an attitude that Nachiketa exhibited. Then the third aspect of Nachiketa's character, to develop into a Shishya which any guru would love to have, where he was offered 3 boons. And the way he chose his boons is beautifully exposes his character. The first had to do with his immediate family. He only wanted that he should be able to go back to his father in the same form. His father should be happy, his father should be able to sleep comfortably and not feel guilty that he sent his son to your Lord Yama. Very limited in its scope. And the second boon, he took full advantage of the fact that Yamadharmaraja had given him 3 boons. He ask for the sake of humanity. Tell me that yajna. Teach me that yajna, which will enable anybody to get to Swargaloka at the end of the Sharira. And that became available to anybody. So that was the second boon. And then when it came to the third boon, Nachiketa was very clear. By that time, he'd already formulated in his head. He wanted to know, is there something that survives death of the physical body? Now look at this. He's already in his mind separating the physical body with something else that survives the body. He didn't know what it was. He said, that is what I want to know. This is where a lot of people have a lot of doubts. Vichikitsitam. Now, this is not knowledge which generally people want to know. That such a thing exists, also people don't know. When we start studying also, we have only a vague idea of moksha jnanam. And as we study more and more and more, it becomes clearer and clearer. Nachiketa also started like that. In fact, if you see the question Nachiketa asked in the first Valli and later in the 14th verse of the second Valli, you can see the difference. In the first Valli, he asks, does something survive death? What is it? By the time he came to the second Valli, verse 14, he wanted to know what is anyatra dharmat dharmat, anyatra kritak kritat, that which cannot be obtained by doing. Anyatra, what transcends past and present and future. That, as you see it, please teach me. Already you can see that his thinking is developed. But before he comes to that question, Yamadharmaraja tries to dissuade him. Maybe genuinely feels that he's too young to try and understand this. But he tries to dissuade him. How? By offering him everything that generally human beings crave for. Satisfaction of sense pleasures of every kind. Attempt to live a very, very long life. Attempt to own a lot of things. All in the false notion that when I can satisfy my sense pleasures, sense requirements, when I can live a very, very long life, people have been trying for a very long time to try and find an elixir for long life, unsuccessfully. And also the sense that if I own more and more things, I will be happier and happier. None of which is true. So Yamadharma Raja tries to tempt him with all of these things. Not only the pleasure that you can find in Martyaloka on this earth, but things you can't find here. alaukika, nritya, gita, vahana, which are not available here. The best vahana you can find here is nothing compared to the kind of vahana that one would expect one would get from other lokas. So he gave him all that, offered him all that. Said, don't ask for this knowledge. It is not easy. It is something even devatas have been struggling to figure out. And later on, he will say, even I struggled to figure out. I didn't know what it was. That's why I got this devata position. Everybody is struggling to figure this out. So don't go there. Gave him all kinds of offers. Nachiketa was very clear. By the end of the first Valli, Nachiketa tells him, all this Nitya, Gita, Vahana, etc., you can keep. I don't want any of these. I want only that knowledge which I asked you earlier. There is nothing equivalent to that. There's nothing equivalent to that because that knowledge is knowledge of Purnatva. It's like saying, in terms of numbers, you have a whole lot of numbers, bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger numbers. But it doesn't matter how big a number you come up with. The distance between that number and infinity is the same. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Whether you're talking about the difference between 10,000 and infinity or a 10 trillion and infinity, the distance is the same. So Nachiketa knew this much, that knowledge, Atma Jnanam, which Yamadharmaraja is so reluctant to give him, is beyond anything you can compare with. So he simply refuses, no, that's not what I want. You gave me 3 boons, 2 I've already encashed. This is my 3rd boon I'm asking you. You better keep your word. Tavayavana Tavanritya Gite. You can keep them. I don't want them. And then Yamadharmaraja agrees and goes to the second Valli, and he doesn't straight away tell him the answer to his question. What was his question earlier? His question was, what survives the death of the body? He didn't tell him that. He went into another aspect, and this you will find a recurring theme throughout the second Valli. That all human beings can look for 2 types of directions, Shreyas and Prayas. You know that human desires are classified broadly into 4 categories: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Dharma, Artha, Kama are finite results. And these have huge limitations. A, they are finite. B, they are ephemeral. C, whatever happiness you think will derive from there is always accompanied by its opposite, dukkha. And then again, There is no end to that. This cannot be the end. There's atripti. Dharma, artha, kama. All of these fall under one category, a limited end result seeking path. And moksha is shreyas. There's no connection between these two. Except that one can consider both to be desirable ends. There is no connection in the path. They're completely different. There's no relationship between the end results. There is no connection between the effort required here and the effort required here. Whereas dharmartha kama, you require to do karma and gain the karma phala which you enjoy. Moksha, there is no karma involved. All karma is only to get ready for moksha jnanam. There it is simply a matter of understanding. So he talks about shreyas and prayers and how people choose prayers mostly because they have no idea that something called shreyas is possible. And even if you have an idea, there's always a question of doubt. No, I read in the I read in the Upanishad, somebody taught me that there is something called moksha, and that is purnatvam. And with that, I get everything that I need. Hey, the very I that you're saying I need is a wrong notion. That has to change. So I don't look at that in that fashion at all. What people look for is what is visible. And where I have made an observation and have reached a conclusion. Observation may be correct, the conclusion is not. The observation is that around me, everybody is striving to gain more material wealth. I should also do the same thing. And what should I do? I should get more than the other fellow. There was an advertisement a long time ago, I remember. I think one of the soaps, Rin or something. उसकी सफेद कमीज मेरे समीज से सफेद कैसे? You're concerned all the time about how is that fellow better than I am. That's all part of the praise. What somebody nicely called the rat race. Rat race is not simply because you want to get ahead in your company. Rat race is this. I'm racing all other rats. At the end of the rat race, I'm still a rat. I'm not changed. That non-understanding of the self is what drives people towards praise goals. Shastra doesn't say that's wrong to have praise goals. It simply says, don't get bound by them. Then you will miss the big picture. You will miss what you really want because you've not made an attempt to try and understand. So he goes on and on and on about this. And not only about this, he also talks about how wonderful Nachiketa is. I offered you so many things. which anybody in the world would have grabbed with both hands. You didn't get tempted. I'm so proud of you. All that he said. I'm proud of you because when I taught you the Nachiketa Agni, you understood it so well that that whole yajna, I have given it a name, Nachiketa. Everybody will know it as Nachiketa Agni. Like in the first 13 verses, he talked about Shreyas and prayers. He talked about the fact that Nachiketa was so clear that what he wants is Shreyas, not prayers. And full of praise for Nachiketa. Nachiketa kept listening to all this. In the 13th verse, he tells Nachiketa, you are eligible now for that knowledge. Of Shreyas. Nachiketa, having listened patiently to all this, I don't think from what we've seen of it, that Nachiketa is particularly interested in listening to his. Normally, if somebody praises you, particularly the Devata praises you, you're very happy. I don't think that was the logic behind Nachiketa listening to all this patiently. I think it had more to do with what the Upanishad is trying to teach everybody else. All of us. Why that praise of Nachiketa is meant to reach out to us saying, listen, if you're engaged in the praise direction with prayer goals, think again. It is meant for that. Having listened to all this, by the time the 13 verses used up to talk about all this, 14th when Nachiketa says, fine, all this is very good. But my question earlier to you, I will redefine. What is it that transcends dharma and adharma? Not only dharma, some transcends dharma and adharma. What transcends dharma and adharma? What a question. What transcends time? Trikalatitaha. I want to know that. As you see it, please explain to me. Then we saw in the second Valli, finally, Yamadharma talks about the knowledge of Atma. And he starts talking about it in a series of paradoxes. This paradox, as you saw, comes from the fact that our perspective is from within the Jagat. Therefore, these things sound like paradoxes. And once we understand the paradox and why we see this as a paradox, Maya becomes very clear to us. Maya, which is the very root cause of samsara. And once Maya becomes clear to you, you have control over Maya and therefore you are a Mayavi. Mayam tu prakritim vidyat, mayinam tu maheshwaram. That mayin is the Ishvara. And if I understand Maya, I am also the mind. Therefore, there is no difference between Ishvara and I. As long as I think of I in this Sharira, there will always be difference. But when the understanding comes, and I'm able to think not just Sharira, but Sharira Traya Atitaha. Then I have control over Maya. So I'm Ishvara as well. This is what happens in the second Valli. These few verses, Anoraniya Mahato Mahiyan, Asharira Sharireshu, etc., etc. All of that are in some form describing Atma. And Dharmaraja is trying to help Nachiketa and all of us understand the nature of Atma, nature of the self. That's why we finished the last verse, last Valli. Yasya brahmacha kshatramcha ubhe bhavata odana. Very interesting imagery saying the entire Jagat represented Aupacharika, Brahmana and Kshatriya, entire society. And Mrityu also. Anything which is time bound, therefore time itself, are like a side dish for that Atma. Meaning that Atma is everything. And that Atma is I, not the Sharira. That there's a morning prayer that you say every day. Pratasmarami hridi sanspuradhatma tattvam Satchit sukham paramahansa gatim turiyam yat swapna jagrata shushupta veti nityam tad brahma nishkalamaham nacha bhuta sangaha. That nature of I, that Atma that transcends everything. That at one stage you think of as the Karanam. And then as understanding develops, even that goes away. So that is how the Upanishad builds the understanding of the nature of Atma. There was one more question. How does the Kathopanishad describe the nature of the self, Atma? Atma cannot be described because there is no description. How are you going to describe an Atma? No words will ever describe Atma. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. You cannot describe the Atma, not available for words. You can describe any object, but you cannot describe the Atma. Therefore, what does the Upanishad do? Every Upanishad resorts to either paradoxes and then try and make us understand the nature of the paradox, or negation. By saying it is not this, not this, not this, not this. Again, you will find a similar this thing when we go to the third valley. How else would you describe Atma? Therefore, we talk of any word that describes an object. There are two types of descriptions you can think of. Vachyartha, the literal meaning of the word, and a lakshyartha, the intended meaning of the word. So, when we describe Atma as Satyam Jnanam Anantam, the Satyam that we understand, Satyam in the Laukika world, is not the Satyam we're talking about. The Jnanam we talk about in this Jagat, opposite of Ajnanam, is not the Jnana we're talking about there. Anandam, which also has an opposite in terms of Ananandam. The Ananda we're talking about and trying to describe the Atma is not that Ananda. All three, when you look at the Lakshyartha, mean one thing only. Padartha. Atma. Satyam is Jnanam, Jnanam is Satyam, Satyam is Anantam, Anantam is Satyam. That one thing which makes the Satyam and Anritam in the Jagat, Jnanam and Ajnanam in the Jagat, Anandam and Ananandam in the Jagat, which enlightens that Atma, that Brahman. So you can't describe Atma by words. It is described, therefore, through these prakriya. The distinction between prayers and shreyas and how do they relate to human goals. Dharmaraja talks a little bit about this as well. Anyat shreyo anyat tutaipa preyaha te ubhe nanarthe purushasthi sinitah tayo shreya adadanasya sadhu bhavati kiyater adhya u preyo vrinite. Most people will ask for prayers. Prayers is visible to me. I know what prayers is. I know I want wealth. I don't know why I want wealth. I think that wealth is going to give me what I really want because I don't know what I want. Therefore, I say, okay, wealth. Why do you choose wealth? Wealth is an example. Why do I choose wealth? A, because everybody seems to be wanting wealth. Therefore, there is something in that. Why is everybody seeking wealth? While in many ways we want to be exceptions in this Jagat, I want to stand out. In these things, we want to follow what everybody else does. So I think if everybody is wanting wealth, there must be something in wealth. Therefore, I should also try for wealth. And then we have this observation that somebody has a lot of wealth. And we arrive at a conclusion that fellow must be very happy. Observation is correct. Conclusion is wrong. Like that for everything, including Punya Papa. I want to warn that nowhere does the Shastra say don't have these desires for prayers. Nothing wrong in having the desire, especially when you talk about dharma. Desire is good. In fact, Bhagavan says, I am in the form of desires. As long as it is correct, not causing problems for anybody else. Dharma viruddho kamosmi. I am that kama. You're absolutely fine to have a kama. But as long as that kama, the desire for any of them, artha, kama, dharma, whatever, as long as it doesn't drive me. Somewhere it says also that having kama is not the problem. Having a desire for something is not the problem. Having a trishna for that is the problem, because then it drives you. Trishna is thirst. Therefore, any prayers, most people will strive for some praise gain. And in today's world, you're judged by how much praise you can exhibit. I've achieved this. And therefore, you're a great person. Okay. The very problem is the idea of I, the person. Okay, you become great, nothing wrong with it. But don't let that push you around. Because sooner or later, that desire will take strong roots unless one exhibits caution from the very beginning of the desire. And that once it takes root, you lose control. Leads to krodha, leads to moha, leads to non-functioning of the buddhi. And without the functioning of the buddhi, a human being will go in the wrong direction. We will see later a very beautiful imagery in the next verse of a ratha. And the buddhi is the one who's actually guiding the ratha, the sarathi, compared to the buddhi. If that fellow is cockeyed, they have no control over the reins, they have no control over the horses, which are the senses. And you will end up where you don't want to go. And look back and say, my God, how did I get here? So the problem is not the desire itself. What Swamiji used to call, as long as you can take out the fangs of the desire, they become non-binding desires. Enjoy it. Bhagavan Krishna liked a mile pili on his head. Nothing wrong. But not having that does not become a source of grief, a pressure point for somehow getting that, even if it means bending dharma. So prayers, the word of caution about prayers that you will see, that it only can get you limited end. It requires effort, karma, and will lead to limited end, an unending limited end. And if you don't get that, if you can satisfy that karma, whether it's artha, kama, or dharma, then what happens? More of it happens. More of the karma happens. Different type of karma perhaps, but more of the same karma perhaps. And if it doesn't happen, you set your goal on certain end in terms of wealth or in terms of any other, and you don't get it. Either it becomes sour grapes or it pushes one to take action which is not dharmic. Both of which, what happens? So what if I also think of it as sour grapes, or if I break a few small rules, bend a few small rules? The loss is great. The loss is great because this will take you away from what you really want, even if it is not clear what I want. The loss is infinite. Therefore, he says, while prayers is nothing wrong with prayers by itself, but if you understand that what you really want is moksha, then prayers won't be able to control you. So that's a difference in Shreyas and prayers we talked about in the second Valli. Okay, those are the things. Central theme of Kathopanishad. How does Kathopanishad describe the nature of the Atma? What is the significance of the story of Nachiketa and Padavadishravas? And the distinction between prayer, Shreyas and prayers, how do they relate to human goals? So this is the relationship. Our understanding of what I really want is a human goal, moksha. And I repeat, when we start this journey, we may not have absolute clarity about what is moksha. But because I have certain shraddha, because my own life experiences taught me that anything else I can get in this jagat is not satisfying. Parikshilokan karmachitan brahmana. Having examined all of them, none of them satisfy. Even if I feel good for a little while, it doesn't last. I'm looking for something else. Therefore, one goes to various sources to try and find out. And somewhere there is this at the back of the mind. We are very fortunate we've been born in this environment, in this country. Despite the efforts of all sort of people, including invaders and others within the country, trying to dissuade us, at the back of the mind, we all have a certain acknowledgement, even sometimes a grudging acknowledgement, that the rishis knew something. The rishis had knowledge which I don't have access to. And therefore I look for that. And I have Shraddha in the Shastra. I know that there is something in these Shastras. Unfortunately, over the last few hundred years, we've even lost this very idea that there is something called Shraddha, Shastra, our scriptures. And then we go on making meaningless statements, simply repeating what somebody else said, saying all religions are the same. Where is the sameness? Without thinking, without sitting down to say, what is it that I really want? And once that bug catches you, then he says, I got to find out where it is. I go and ask around. And that's where Shastra itself says, please ask around, but ask with certain attitude. Pranipatena and pariprashnena. You ask. I want to understand. You tell me something, fine. I have great respect for you as a guru, but I'm not taking it on the face value. I want to understand. And with the seva bhava. In Kathopanishad says, you approach the guru samitpanihi, with an attitude saying, I want to know. I'm not here to challenge Shastra or the guru. I genuinely want to know. Therefore, I might ask questions. Sometimes my questions might look absurd. In fact, if I look back on the questions which I asked when I started the study, I might laugh at myself. How did I ask such a silly question? But it encourages you to ask. No other religion does that. Ask. Get the answer. Think about it. Do contemplative thinking. Compare to all the other things that you know, your experiences, and see where the differences are. Go back and ask again. And once I'm clear that while I will enjoy all the results of the pious efforts that I make, I am not going to allow it to control me. Because I have understood something much, much, much bigger, infinitely bigger, is available to me. And that is what Dharmaraja is trying to explain in the second chapter, second Valli. That while the most of humanity hankers after prayers, ends, Nachiketa and hopefully all of us are striving to find out the real truth and understand Moksha Jnanam. So third Valli will start. We will start that tomorrow. With this very beautiful imagery. Again, third Valli starts today in first verse, which simply says, both are available to you. Praise is available to you, Shrey is available to you. You choose. You don't have to give up praise for getting Shreyas. Let this continue. Don't let that become your master. That's how the whole third Valli will start. And then we will continue with the wonderful imagery of the Ratha. We'll do that tomorrow. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.